Congressman, it's Alex Wagner. Thanks for your time tonight. Given the snowflakey recalcitrance of former President Trump, one wonders whether Vice President Pence is on your list of people to speak with in short order, just because he seems to be more inclined to embrace the institution of democracy and might be a more cooperative witness. And on that note, I'd ask you, given your previous concerns about Vice President Pence and the choices made by his security detail on January 6th, do you at this point have reason to believe that Secret Service agents were trying to remove the vice president from the Capitol grounds for reasons other than his security?
Well, you ask some trenchant questions there. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to give you all the answers to them. But let's just say if there is someone who has not yet been subpoenaed by the committee, that doesn't mean we won't subpoena them. Obviously, the clock is ticking very much on this Congress and on this committee, so decisions have to be made in short order. And I'll just say a lot of what I've learned about the Secret Service, or at least a particular group within it, over the course of this process has definitely raised my eyebrows and my concern. And that's something that, could be part of our report. I don't know. And it could be part of future oversight activity by Congress.
Okay, can I follow up on that? I know that Tony Ornato is a person of great interest here, and we know that Tony Ornato was in contact on January 6th with Keith Kellogg, who is the head of Vice President Pence's national security detail. Keith Kellogg was the one that pushed back on Tony Ornato, who wanted to have Vice President Pence removed from the Capitol. Do you think Tony Ornato may have been doing the bidding of the president when he was requesting for the vice president to be removed?
I don't have enough information to opine about that important question that you just posed. I'll just say I think I've said this before, that the 6 most chilling words that have surfaced in this investigation, to my mind, were, "I'm not getting in that car." And they might be 6 of the most chilling words ever to appear in a congressional investigation. And I believe, this is not a verbatim quote, but I believe that the vice president said something to the effect of, well, you're not the one driving the car. So, look, I think that was a very dicey moment for American democracy. And on that day, and I speak only to that day alone, Vice President Pence was a constitutional patriot simply by doing his job and by refusing to back down. There are other indicators that, obviously the whole point of the plot was to get Pence to buckle under to Donald Trump on January 6th and to step outside of his constitutional role and to proclaim and announce new unilateral extra constitutional powers just to vaporize electoral college votes from Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. They wanted to either just declare victory on the floor for Trump or kick the whole thing over in the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election under the 12th Amendment, where we'd be voting not on the basis of one member, one vote, but one state, one vote. They had 27 states. We have 22. Pennsylvania's tied 9-9. So they had a 27-22 win, although they might have lost. I suspect they would have lost the at-large representative from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, but they still would have had 26 votes. So that was the plan, to get Pence to step outside his constitutional role. But there are some suggestions that they also were happy with a backup plan of just removing Pence from the action and then somehow proceeding to declare Trump the victor or kick it into the House for a contingent election. And at that point, of course, we think that, or at least I believe, that Donald Trump would have followed the advice of his disgraced former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, who was urging him to invoke the Insurrection Act, as Stuart Rhodes had been calling on him to do, and to declare martial law and then bring in the National Guard to put down the insurrectionary violence he had unleashed against us, but blame the whole thing on Antifa. And that's my best read of where they were going on that day.
I will say, with the answer that he gave you, Alex, in terms of thinking about how he thinks that was going, in terms of what they were trying to do with removing Pence and why and what they would then do and how the 2 different paths they would then have. I mean, that was...
The plan was, it was choose your own adventure. Either way, it was going to end in Trump being getting another 4 years, I suppose, both of their plans. And also very much leaving the door open to the committee calling Vice President Pence to testify.
If Vice President Pence believed that they were going to put him in that car and drive him away from the Capitol as part of the plot, so as to advance the overthrowing of the government and the installation of somebody by force rather than by law, if he believed that, and that's why he said, I'm not getting in that car. Yes.
And by the way, Jamie Raskin has been saying those are I'm not getting in the car.
Yeah.
Vice President Pence said to the head of security detail, he says this over and over again, the 6 most chilling words of this whole thing. And we have had chills.
Yeah. And they're only chilling if they have that implication.
Exactly.
Wow.